Welcome everyone to the Poetry Room at City Lights. It's great to be back here after many moons of pandemic. And for those of you online, welcome as well. We, of course, are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. I want to take a moment to offer our respects to those who have come before us as stewards of the land. So, one of the great thrills about doing this work is that occasionally you will come across a book that really touches you in some very deep way. And in fact, the greater majority of what we program are books that we care about. They're not necessarily bestsellers. You'll notice that about our calendar. So when we came across Sami Hermez's book, it was one of those books. And it really very deeply touched many of us here at City Lights. So My Brother, My Land, A Story from Palestine is the book. It is published by Redwood Press, which is under the auspices of Stanford University Press. And it is a remarkably woven narrative, essentially telling the story of an entire homeland through the frame of one woman's life. It is the story of Sireen Sawalha and her family. Sami Hermez has beautifully woven together different narratives, generating a rich range of perspectives, almost tapestry-like, I should say, utilizing oral history, memoir, and creative nonfiction. He has captured the complexities of life in Palestine, moving beyond the mainstream media cliches and giving us an honest and intelligent view that doesn't shy away from the ethical tensions, the contradictions, and the trauma experienced by a people under perpetual occupation. So we have a surprise for us. We thought it was only going to be Sami, but we have Sireen Sawalha with us as well. We are so thrilled that we can have both of them in the same, but it just gives it another dimension altogether. So to give you a little bit of background about Sami, he is an anthropologist who teaches at Northwestern University in Qatar. He is the author of War is Coming, Between Past and Future Violence in Lebanon. His work is in and out of the classroom, reflecting a strong commitment to social justice. And he makes his home in Doha with his family. Really want to thank some of you, the crew of Stanford, who are some of us with us here tonight. Thank you so much for coming up for this. And for those of you online, you may purchase books through the link I have posted in the chat function of your Zoom dashboard. So without much more ado, welcome to City Lights. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for this invitation and a beautiful introduction. And thank you to Stanford University and the members of Stanford Press that are here today, thank you to Sireen also for being here. I wanted to begin with a few words, and then maybe Sireen will say a few words, and then I'll do a reading from several scenes from the book. This book, this project has been a long time in the making. It's been 20 years. I always aspired to be, I guess, a writer. And then I went to do my PhD thinking that's how one becomes a writer. Instead of maybe taking some writing courses and challenging myself that way. But luckily, when I started, I met Sireen at Princeton, and we embarked on this project. And it's been a real struggle. This 20 years, I felt I was given this gift, which was this immense responsibility that turned into I guess a heavy weight at times, trying to put this together and finish this. And so I'm really happy that it's come together and it's seen the light of day in this lifetime and not the next. I'll just turn it over if Sireen wants to say a few words. Just also, Peter had already mentioned that this is woven together through her stories and research done in Palestine and Beirut, in archives, and trying to sort of weave her and her narrative and my voice together throughout the book. So you'll hopefully get a taste of that in the reading.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for Stanford Press. Thank you, Peter. Thanks for my family and all the friends and audience here. It was hard working with Sami, by the way. He's saying it's easy. It was not easy. So when I met Sami, I already have 3 kids, and he was a student in Princeton. So I was telling him the other day, he said, I'm like your brother. I said, no, I always felt you're like my son. I'm married with 3 kids, and here's this young man is studying. He's a student in the university. So whenever he come, I have to feed him. So he's like my son. And then the other day when I saw him, I was like, what happened? Where you get all this gray hair? So I'm not used to my son to grow this fast. Yeah, it took a while, but it was great. It came in the right time. Yeah, it came in the right time, I think, and I appreciate Sami started a family and children, and I was telling him, I think my WhatsApp can make another book, because I kept calling him and leaving him a message. What happened to the book? What's going on in the book? Where in the book? So I never deleted any communication with him, but he did a great job. Thank you very much for telling my story and my family story. And there is time while he wanted to say it different way, and I insist it has to be this way, because I felt that's how it's me, and it's coming from me and from my experience. So, and he was able to listen always to me. So thank you very much, Sami. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and I guess one more thing is the sort of project that this was is that the drafts just kept going back and forth, and in this way you end up with this kind of I think this kind of writing that brings our voices together. So again, hopefully you'll see that when you read the book. So I was going to begin with the beginning, from the prologue, the opening scene, primarily because it's a scene that means a lot to Sireen, and so I think it's only fitting to begin with it, and yeah, so I'll start there. Visitor's room, an Israeli prison, 1999. Returning to the prison consumed all of Yusuf's energy. Afterward, she remained in bed all day. But like the full moon, she had to return. She had to see her son. For in his absence, her chest was tight, her breath suffocating. Habibi Aini, how are you? She asked him excitedly. I'm good. God makes things easy, Iyad responded, his face lit up with joy. Then he paused and glanced around. Where's the Hajj? He asked his mother. Abuk kan ta'ban. Your father was tired the past 2 days. He didn't think we would be able to see you, replied Yusuf. Iyad met his mother's words with a slight frown and lowered eyebrows. He nodded. His father had been dealing with diabetes for over 10 years. Sireen examined her younger brother as he exchanged words with their mother. She could see him panning the room as if still expecting their father to emerge from the shadows. His broad shoulders shrugged at the news. She saw her eyes in him, earthy with a blend of green and brown, now shimmering against his short, dark beard. Sireen's voice. It was hard to imagine, despite all the years that had gone by with him in prison, that my brother had been involved in resistance activities, that my brother was a prisoner of war. She thought back to the last time she saw him free, a time before she had left for the US. The two of them were brother and sister. This was true. But they might as well have been strangers leading separate lives, strangers who left indelible marks on each other. Sireen had been around in Iyad's early years. She had spent many hours telling him stories and taking him on imaginary adventures. But it had been a decade and a half since they had lived under the same roof, a decade and a half since their paths began to diverge. Sireen, There is one story I always remember, the story of Shatir Hassan, the brave, smart, hardworking Hassan. In my version, Hassan falls in love with the king's daughter. The king agrees to let them marry on condition that Hassan is able to retrieve a stolen jewel on the peak of a mountain. 7 hills, each guarded by a hyena that Hassan has to outwit, stands between him and the peak. It is a near impossible task. Sometimes the story took me 2 nights to complete, and Iyad listened to every word. Shatir Hassan is ultimately able to maneuver the hyenas, free the jewel, and live happily ever after with the king's daughter. Sireen, I miss your stories, Iyad blurted out. Sireen smiled. It was as if the two of them were little again. He wanted her to talk about her life, but the prison walls did not inspire her. She glanced at her mother. Although she knew there was tenderness underneath, their relationship had always been rocky. She did not want to discuss her problems in the US around her, and Iyad would likely not understand or might take their mother's side anyway. She decided the less they knew, the better, so she stuck with generalities. Mother and sister sat with Iyad for over an hour that day. His face was bright and alive. The 2 women were all smiles. They all laughed together, and he felt rejuvenated. But there were moments when they avoided eye contact and fidgeted, studied their hands, repeated questions they had already asked about Iyad's health and whether he had enough food. When they felt the sting of the place and were reminded of the walls around them, walls within the walls of occupation within which each of their lives was framed. Before they left, Iyad pleaded with Sireen to help him. Sireen, you have to get me out. Use your contacts in the US. Don't leave me here. So, yeah, as I said, this is a scene that's, I think, has a lot of weight, and maybe Sireen can say a few words.
So, the last time I saw Iyad was 1990, December. And before that scene, 1999, 9 years later. And I took this picture. That's Iyad. He was like, this young boy was so excited, wearing the Palestinian flag sweaters knitted by my neighbor and kufiya. He never even got to see this picture. I developed it in the United States. And so I'm the big sister. He's the youngest little kid. So excited. His sister is going to the US and stuff like that, and waiting to visit her. And then a year later, he got arrested. So working in the United Nations, I made connection. I pleaded with the Amnesty International, Red Cross, to give me a permission to visit Iyad in person in prison. And I did not want to visit him behind fence. I want to be physically sitting with him. I got it guaranteed. My happiest part of this book, this visit, actually. So, sorry. We get to the prison gate, but I want to tell you, we left home 2 o'clock in the morning because it takes hours. The prison is on Ashkelon in the border of Gaza, and living in Jenin, or the skirt of Jenin, 20 minutes from downtown Jenin, it's really a long drive. So we take a taxi to downtown Jenin, to the Red Cross. They open at 5. The Red Cross took us to the Tulkarem took us to the Israeli border to another field. We sat there until 8 o'clock, the checkpoint opened. The woman brought a blanket, cheese and bread and tomato and cucumber, and everybody starts sharing a breakfast. And I have Basil, 6 years old, and I have Zaid, 3 years old, with me. And that morning before I left, I said to my mom, how am I going to manage? I never took this far trip with 2 little kids. She asked my dad to come with me. He did not feel well. And he said, I don't want to go all this trip and not to be able to visit, because the visit is for her and her kids. Then my mom agreed to come with me, to show me and help me carrying the kids from one bus to another bus. And when we get there, the Israeli soldiers who registered the name, after like 5-6 hours, refused to let me visit. He threw my passport and get out of the window. driving there, passing the highway in the desert, I saw a payphone, and it's like a message for me. Nobody had a cell phone that time. So 1999, I get so angry, and I want to call the Red Cross, and I want to call New York, and nobody has a cell phone. I left the kids with my mom. I walked 20 minutes back to the highway to that payphone. I made a collect call to the Red Cross in Jerusalem. I made another collect call to the Red Cross in Tel Aviv. And then finally, half an hour waiting next to that phone, somebody gets back to me, and I insist, and I bleeded, and I cried. I'm coming all the way from the US. I really don't want to see him from behind the fence. I really want to sit with him and hug him. And finally, my wish came true. They called somebody and they told me, don't go to the visitor door, go to the main gate where the soldiers enter. I went there, and this soldier, she came in with a big smile, greeting me, and she said, who's with you? And I said, my mom and my 2 kids. And she said, she can visit. Oh my God. The reaction of my mom, first time she's going to hug him after like 8 years. He was sentenced to 125 years. She never touched him other than Binky through the fence. My mom could not stand it. So we went through the security, researched our body. She sneaked in basil bucket and Zaid bucket, cherry and plums, 2 in each bucket from our garden. So Iyad can taste something from our trees. When they searched Zaid, the 3 years old, they found them. So they took them. When they get to search Basil, he has this curly long hair up to here. He was so cute. They start playing with him. They forgot to search his bucket. And we made it. Iyad was able to try some of my mom's fruit tree. So we walked into this room, and this young kid I left, he's 6'3", gorgeous, tall. He looked at me and he says, what happened? Did you shrink? I was the big sister. He was the little kid. We sat, and he bought a bag of chocolate and cookies and every drink from the canteen. All his allowance that month, he brought it for my kids so he can be the great uncle, make up for all these years. And we talked, and it just, when I'm leaving, he said, Matt and Sini, don't forget me. And as soon as I left the next morning, I was in Jerusalem meeting Liat Semel. She was only the Israeli lawyer who will take Palestinian cases. And she was grateful for that. I thank her. She took the case. But then, as much as I still remember that hug from him while I'm barely reaching him, and his warm smile, and he tried to be optimistic and smiling and happy and telling me all these stories. He did not mention anything about the struggle he's been going through in prison. So he brought me back to the story I used to tell Iyad. I'm a good storyteller when I was young, but I want to tell you, I'm the 3rd girl. So Suzanne, Maysoon, and then me. And 4 years later, my mom is having girls, Middle East, and want the boy. And my grandmother started pushing my father to marry the new wife so she can have the boy. Ibn Banat, the mother of the girls, she called my mom. She picked already the bride for him, by the way. And then 4 years later, my mom had Yusuf, my oldest brother. Oh my God, it was heaven and big celebration. And then Ihab, and then Iyad. So I'm the 3rd girl, he's the 3rd boy. We're the only one who look alike. Olive skin, green eyes. I don't know, nobody in the family, olive skin and green eyes, by the way. But we look alike. And the same behavior, always smiling, even in the hard time. So he was very quiet as the 3rd boy and always shy. And when he play soccer in the street, get his clothes dirty, and my mom screamed at him, he will hide in the corner and cry. And I used to call him the cat. He was like soft, kind. So to put him to sleep, mattresses in the floor. We all lay down, a room for the girls, a room for the boys. And the easiest way to tell him a story. And I will make up stories, and I don't even remember them in the next day. But he has a sharp memory that he remembered the story. And he said, you stopped here. I fell asleep. Can you continue? So Shatir Hassan It's one of my favorite story. When he go to the mountain to meet the hyenas, he has this line. As soon as he entered to the mountain, he said, "Salamu alaikum," and the hyenas will reply, which is peace upon you. And the hyenas will reply, "Lola salamak saba kalamak لخل جبال السود واسمع أرشع دامك." And I will say to him, and he will get so scared. Means, if you did not greet me with the peace greeting, I will eat you, and the whole mountain will hear chopping your bones, like chewing your bones. And I will repeat it 7 times. And it was his favorite. He will giggle, hide under the blanket, and fell asleep. And it just like, I never forgot that story. I mean, years, I still remember how much he used to enjoy it. So I don't want to take much. I know you want to hear Sami reading, but that's just the memory every time I read that chapter, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sireen. Yeah, I mean, I think also what's nice here is that you get to see the sort of the way she tells the stories. And one of the things that she mentioned, the part where they sneak in the cherries, actually doesn't make it into the book, which is an interesting kind of, you know, the decisions that one makes as an author to, you know, to tell a story, and what makes it in, what ends up you know, dropping out. But that moment of the cherries kind of drops out. But in any case, I'm gonna read another scene. This scene gives you a sense of so that the story is not, you know, it's not just about Iyad, it's not about Sireen, it's about the family, but it's also about a village, Kufr Ra'i. And so this scene is one where the two of us are walking down the streets of Kufr Ra'i, and I'm sort of telling this. Incidentally, it's one of the few chapters in which I'm actually present. So you know, don't take this as sort of the way the book is. It's one of the few chapters where I can bring myself in, besides the conclusion and the introduction, or not introduction, the prologue. Okay. My mornings in Kufr Ra'i often left me oscillating between serenity and unease. When a rooster cackles, a nearby dog barks, and the birds chirp through a pleasant summer breeze, one can momentarily lose sight of who is in control of this land. The hills in the distance hum secrets of the morning dew and carry stories of farmers on their way to work. All around, the landscape masks the politics in its midst, and for a moment, one could be excused for forgetting that the horizon is a prison wall and that the land is being settled by strangers. Nature gives people moments like this, perhaps in its attempts to make the rest of the day tolerable. On my 3rd day, Sireen and I walked into town together. She wore beige trousers and a tank top under a white, light cotton sweater and a lavender shawl patterned with black flowers hanging loosely over her hair. It was not her typical attire. She tended to wear clothes that showed her arms and shoulders, dresses with a lot more color, reds, yellows, and blues, and no head covering. Blues, maybe? Yeah. Sireen's voice. I feel like I'm the black sheep of the family now. I'm the only one who doesn't wear a hijab, and I'm too independent for my mother. She still thinks she can tell me what to do, what to wear, who to see, how to behave. I walked alongside Sireen as she looked ahead into the hills of Palestine and talked to me about her past, sometimes wide-eyed like a little girl, pointing fingers at the places where she spent the most time, sometimes with melancholy in her voice when remembering the people that were gone or the places that had changed. Together, we felt the early morning dew in the sweet but dense air. Smoke from a nearby clay oven, the taboon, filled our surroundings with the aroma of rising bread, and the world felt calm, but for a few bricklayers in the distance, hammering away at their morning. As we walked and she shared stories, I noticed her eyes soften and stare into the distance, fixating on the unseen. as if she were peering into the Kufr Ra'i of old to help me imagine her village past. She almost lost her balance between these two worlds, living in one, holding on to the other. I tried to discern through her descriptions what only she could see. What was once a beaten path was now flattened and paved. The steep sandy slope that led from her house into the main village street met the same fate to accommodate more cars. From Sireen's childhood house, one used to be able to see the tree-scattered land stretch to the village of Saida and spot Burqin and Yabad. But now there was no stretch of land, only a few dozen new homes built in the past decade. At night, their lights, scattered around the hills, lit up the valley in between. I squinted to imagine the escape routes into the hills between Kufr Ra'i and Saida that I heard Iyad would have used to elude capture from the occupation army. How difficult they would be to take now. One would have to trust each resident along the way not to betray one's whereabouts. Sireen walked out of the side road and led to the boys' school behind Dar Abu Shukri. It was a 2-minute walk from her childhood home. The girls' school was at the other end of the village. It was a long walk, 45 minutes for a young kid, she told me. I walked it. It was a trek. Sireen's voice. My mother would watch my sisters and me from the roof as we hurried off to school. Don't you dare talk to any boys on the way. Aib, she would yell from above. It was her signature way of bidding us farewell every morning. In those days, from the roof, my mother had a more or less unobstructed view all the way to the corner of my grandfather's house, halfway to school. She was so controlling. She watched us walking back from school, and if we strayed a bit from our path, she might beat us and accuse us of trying to get the attention of boys hanging out in the streets. We were not even allowed to speak to any of our girlfriends who had brothers. Fraternizing with boys was absolutely shameful. We couldn't even go to a relative's house if there were boys there. So if I went somewhere and just saw the shoe of a man lying outside the door to a house, I turned around and went home. I didn't take any chances. Sireen took me into the center of the village that now felt more like a small town. The steady stream of cars disrupted her thoughts and the flow of our conversation in a way that would have never happened in the past. The village baker's store still stood, though somewhat invisible among the many shops that had sprouted over the decades. The baker's role in the village is not as vital as it used to be, as bread now pours in from other places in the West Bank. Sireen and I then turned to look at the original town center on a hill a stone's throw away, where the first homes of Kufr Ra'i were built densely near each other, looking like a mini kasbah. It stood as a ruin, though the mayor was desperately trying to preserve it. I wondered to myself, does ruin look out at us, this life, and the newer town center, and think it is better off as ruin? Sireen and I spent our days this way, walking around the village, visiting relatives and her old friends. They welcomed her with warm hugs and kisses and the excitement with which one greets a loved one after a long period of absence. She remained connected to this place, in her element, and confident enough to introduce me to people who felt enough at ease around her to share their histories with me. Sireen and I grew closer and learned more about each other as well. In the evening, we returned to her house and exchanged thoughts on the day or caught up with her siblings. I wrote down a few notes. She narrated more stories of her life, which I always enjoyed listening to. She never tired of her memories, never tired of sharing with me all the emotions they evoked. So I don't know if you want to say something about this.
So funny. He skipped one part. Imagine a divorced woman, never wear hijab, all her 7 sisters covered, and her mom is bringing a young man to Kufr Ra'i, a village. I'm the only woman in the whole village does not cover her hair. They don't even call me by Sireen anymore. The American is coming, the American is leaving. That's how they call me. Bringing this young man. Did you forget to tell them your hair was up to here? They never. And walking confident in the street. That was the part you skip, right? So when I called my mom in Kufr Ra'i, less than 6,000 people. One main road has like the same road the cars take from the beginning of the village to the end of the village and they go back. And I called my mom, I'm bringing Sami. Oh my God. And my mom says, no way. And I'm insisting on bringing Sami. We have no hotels within even a distance for Sami to stay. So Sami's staying with the family. Yeah, and then I taken Sami and walking in the street. I could see it in my mom every time I come back, waiting for the woman, you know, the older woman seeing us passing our house and calling my mom, who's this man who's walking with your daughter? My mom always says, what do you want to tell them? Should I say her son? Yeah, it's really I remember those I brought him twice with me, and the third time actually we met in Amman, Jordan. My niece was wedding, and as soon as I saw Sami coming from back and from far from in Jordan, I ran to him and hugged him. Oh boy, my mom did not talk to me for 3 days. Imagine my son is coming from Lebanon and not to say hello to him. I did not see him for over 2 years, and he was coming with his wife. But yes, that's what type my mom. When he described the scene walking in the street, he will be in the rooftop. And if we like the boys' school, beginning of the village, the girls' school in the end, the girls get released half an hour early so they can quickly get home, and then they release the boys. And if any of the boy skipping school that day and standing in the road and I walk differently, then I walk straight, my eyes in the ground. My mom, as soon as I get up, why you did that? You were walking this way to get his attention. That's how my mom was. I was like, I swear to you, I did not even notice him. So yes, and so my grandfather, which is I love dearly, he lived to be 110 years, and he used to tell me so many stories serving under the Ottoman Empire. I used to stay a lot with him, and I have two uncles who they have boys older than me. So if I go to my grandfather's house, as soon as I enter the big gate, if I see boys' shoes or men's shoes, I'm not allowed in. I have to turn and go home because no way I could be sitting in the same sitting with my cousin. So no falling in love, guys, until we get to college. Until we got to college, yes. So yeah, I remember those days. I took you to school. I took you even to the olive trees, and we climbed the olive trees. I show him how we used to climb them and pick up the olives, and I show him how I could shoot trucks so far, if you remember that. Yeah, and literally those days, I took him to every spot. My grandfather, my uncle, my school. The dukkan, the store, we used to buy our snacks in the morning and everything. I just felt if he lived the moment with me, he can really write about it from my experience. And he was really patient with me, waking him up in the morning and walking all these areas all around to get that experience and to live those moments with me. So, and I do that every time I go home. Literally, my mom, every afternoon, I go to the plum and the olive land we have, and it's a long distance. And my mom always, now she fears settlers because we have a lot of settlement around that land, and she always gets paranoid when I leave. But it's just that my child memory, going and helping her in the field, and I want to keep doing that. And even the season will be over, but it's just every day that's my route, going back to the land. So yeah, going back is very important for me. Yeah. So thanks.
I don't, do we have time for another scene? Okay. Yeah, no, I think those trips back and just walking through the village streets and in her on her land sort of gave me sort of I guess a deep sense of the place and what it was like to live there. But at the same time, I think the ways in which Sireen tells the story and going back to those stories also helped me to write and imagine the scenes as best as possible. So I'll read from this third and final scene, and then maybe we can take questions, and if you wanted to say also something about it. Okay, so this is a scene where Sireen actually is coming back from Amman. And she's leaving to the U.S. Soon after. And so she's coming back to see her family and to see Iyad, and it's sort of a scene from one of the nights that she's there. Iyad came home on the second day of Sireen's visit. They met with warm smiles, a comfortable affection in the crinkling of their eyes. They hugged tightly, and Iyad kissed her forehead. Yusuf had made Sireen's favorite dish for lunch, ma'lube, and they spent the rest of the afternoon catching up. Later that night, everyone went to sleep except for Sireen and Iyad. The house was quiet as they sat under a dim, flickering kerosene light in the glass-enclosed balcony, enjoying a June breeze through two of its open windows. Iyad was wearing a gray tracksuit and bent over to fix his crew socks. He then turned to his sister and asked, "Can you make me dinner?" In Sireen's voice. "Really?" I exclaimed. "No way, it's too dark." "Yalla, you barely ever see me," Iyad was persistent. "Please don't make me get up. I miss your food." He gave me a smile and was being annoying. "No, you don't," I said. "Khalas, I'm tired." "Yalla, please, for me," he continued to nag. In the end, I caved and said fine, but I told him it wouldn't be anything fancy, just fried eggs, labneh, and a plate of zayt za'atar. Then, suddenly, we heard dogs bark in the distance. Sireen startled, and the barking grew much louder. Iyad looked into his sister's eyes. She could see the worry in the lowering of his eyebrows and the biting of his lip. But his steady shoulders showed the confidence of a man who had been in this situation many times before. The barking was followed by the sound of engines revving as vehicles gained speed. Iyad and Sireen looked out and saw lights flare from two military vehicles rumbling up the road. Iyad slipped on his shoes, double knotted the laces, and clicked the door back open. Sorry. Sireen's voice. "I had just enough time to dip 2 pieces of bread in za'atar mixed with oil. I slipped them into my brother's hand. He grabbed a banana, his favorite fruit, and set off." In my voice. From the back exit, he passed Farid's house and the houses of 2 other neighbors. Then it was just him, a long, winding path, and the dark hills ahead, with no homes and not a soul in sight. Soldiers knocked on the front gates, disturbing the jasmine tree. Sireen took her time to open it. When she did, they questioned her briefly, but when a neighbor's dog barked behind the house and further up the road, they knew Iyad had snuck out. They hurried back to their vehicles in chase. Iyad sprinted up the main path, then slipped out of sight, using shrubs to hide his path. He melted into the rugged landscape, gliding in the darkness through rocky paths he had used many times before. In a few short minutes, he had scrambled down the hill on which his home was perched and made it halfway up another hill. Military vehicles hunted him down the dirt path, moving slowly. The soldiers scanned the area, but their view was limited, as they were unwilling to trek into the valley. Iyad came to a cave within one of the surrounding hills. He entered and covered the opening with rocks and branches. There he waited, passing the time trying to pick za'atar out of his teeth and hoping snakes in the wild would let him be. By the time the military had finished scanning the area from afar, he had dozed off. The next morning, he walked into his family house covered in white dust, and Sireen could breathe again. So I think this piece, I think, also juxtaposed with the other one, you could see that sort of changes in the landscape. I'm obviously in the earlier scene, I'm visiting many years later, and so here he's able to sort of glide through these hills unseen, without lights in the distance. But also, this sense of her voice and the narrator kind of moving back and forth in this sort of narrative. So before we maybe open it to questions, if you wanted to say.
Yeah, actually, this scene that day, this is the one when I took this picture. Um, we have this thing in the Middle East. Lunch is the biggest meal, and dinner always za'atar, labane, cucumber, and tomato, like little things. And I'm there only for a week, and I'm leaving to the United States December 17 in a few days. And what I remember, I just got a nice leather jacket from my sister who was in her honeymoon. And as soon as I walked in, Iyad eyes in the girl leather gray jacket. And it's my first leather jacket, and I'm so excited about it. And Iyad kept trying it, and it's fitting him. And Iyad won it. And that night, I'm making him food, and we're talking. What I want to tell you is, like, we had electricity, but we turn it off by 8 o'clock at night. The more light you have, the easier the Israelis spot the wanted kids. And the signal for us is the wild dogs barking. The village is so quiet. Nobody dare to drive their car after 6. Sundown, everybody hide in their home. They eat dinner by 8, people already sleeping. That's how my village. So the wild dogs barking, it's our signal. Israeli soldiers is entering the village. And he right away. So my old house was 2 floors. The first floor, a small gate. The second floor, huge green gate with a jasmine tree in it, and where a car can enter, park, and people can enter to the living room and a dining room. The first floor gate is the family, us, the local, and the family. Guests will never use that little gate. So when the Israeli soldiers come to the big gate, and he just, my great aunt Ida used to call him Tarazan. He jumped so fast and he disappeared. And he came the next day with, oh my God, dirt, messy, like this clean, nice boy disappeared. So he roll and roll and roll until he got somewhere. And me, all my life, I fear snake until now. If I see them in TV, I turn it on. So he's like, I put that idea in their head and my kids' head, like fearing snakes. And a few years ago, I decided actually to go and visit that cave. And I sat in front of it and wondering how Iyad was not scared to hide there. It's really deep and scary. And yeah, so it's just like another time they came, wanted him. As soon as they smacked the door open, the door made a corner. He stood up behind the corner. They searched the whole house, dumped everything in the closet, first floor, second floor, screaming at my mom and dad, and Iyad in the corner of the door, holding his breath. My God, he was so amazing. The third time they came in, he quickly lined up under everybody. So they uncover the faces. He was under our legs. He lay down this way while everybody was over him. Like he will jump to ideas to escape being arrested. I mean, it just, that last time I saw him free outside the house, that's the last day I saw him. So I want to tell you the ending. I wake up the next morning for a taxi to take me to the checkpoint to Jordan, to the border. And what was missing? My gray leather jacket. And when I visited in prison, still was with him. Still was with him. Yeah, he took it from me. So that's what I remember about him. He always smiled. He has this great smile. Yeah. And I think Sami earlier described what I was wearing in the village. You know, you need to know, my mom will never let me walk in my village with not head cover. So to make her happy, I'll put the half scarf. If I have a short sleeve, I put on like a jacket like this in the top. And yeah, so I have to respect her and dress modest around the village.
I was gonna say about that scene. Anyway, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Well, maybe we can take questions, and then if it Kufr Ra'i. Maybe we can take questions, and then if, as you were talking, I was thinking about something, and I kind of lost my train of thought. But if, yeah. maybe pass this on. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things, two things actually, that as Sireen was talking, that story of the door, when he hides behind the door. I remember hearing the story. I don't know if I ever told you, but some of these scenes, some of these scenarios seem absurd, right? And hard to believe. And so I can't say that I didn't, myself doubt, right? Like this stuff doesn't happen, right? Like how can this happen? And I remember going when I went back, when I went to Kufr Ra'i, and I spoke to the family, not in her presence. Like the same story came up, right? And sort of corroborating, but it really it made me realize that the stories of the oppressed in general oftentimes seem absurd to people on the outside, that we don't believe, right? And so, and you can understand this, happens in all kinds of situations where the oppressed are trying to tell you their story, and it sounds, this stuff can't happen. People can't be this terrible to cause this kind of situation. So this was one of those moments in which myself, felt like, I haven't lived through this, right? The other thing I wanted to say is also this juxtaposition between, she was sort of telling you the same story between the oral and the written, and how that, the way that sort of transforms, which I had to struggle with for a long time, this sort of question of representation. How do you represent this oral story on the page in a way that, like, I felt so committed to try to tell it the way she's telling it, and so it always, it was just difficult that at some point I had to kind of let that go and say, this is the writing is a separate project, there's a different way of telling, and to kind of give myself that space to write. So yeah, this just came up from. So sorry if you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. This was so powerful and so beautiful. And I have so many questions, but I feel like most of them will be answered when I read the book. So I also think, no need to give too many spoilers, so that everyone can go and dig into the rest of your story in the book. So for Sireen, I wanted to ask you if you can tell us maybe a little bit about the situation in Kufr Ra'i now, given what's happening, especially because you mentioned, right, the settlements and things, and with the genocide, and sort of like how they're managing, like, kind of just, I'd love to hear more about that. And Sami, because especially the current situation, I can't help but thinking the research that you were able to do is maybe no longer possible for a lot of people. And so I just kept thinking as you were talking, like your experience of spending so much time there, being able to go. Did you encounter difficulties? How, your ability to actually spend time there? Was there, if you could just tell us more about the experience. Thank you.
So I was visiting last summer, and me and my mom went to my aunt, and she's like 10-minute walk from our house. And usually in a small village, we don't drive. Even my brother has a car. And we're sitting there. It's already past 1 o'clock, which is university. It's in the West Bank, by the way. It's very scary. And suddenly the whole town so quiet. And then we start hearing the dog barking. And her son jumped in and says, "Let me give you a ride. You need to go home." And I was like, "Why?" And he says, the dogs is barking so loud. There's something wrong. And literally, by the time he dropped us in front of our gate, he turned off his car. He has to hide with us. And he was right. The Israeli tanks, one after the other, 7 of them, one after the other. So here I'm so smart, running to the rooftop of my house. They're texting me because they just saw it online that the Israeli military invading Kufr Ra'i. And I wanted to quickly to turn my phone and take pictures. And by my mistake, I did not turn off the flash. And my mom smacked my phone, dropped it to the floor because we're hiding in the edge of the roof because they could shoot in us. And they were coming to arrested a young boy in my neighborhood, Ibn Nabil Saeed. He was in prison for 19 years and he was released after 9 years. He did the hunger strike and he's really, really sick. And suddenly he's wanted because his Islamic Jihad, and the Israeli interrogated him and want him back. And every time they come in, he has 2 older brother, they help him escape. So they throw a couple of 4 or 5 bombs, scare the heck of us until 3 o'clock in the morning. And the scary moment is my brother Baha, who spent years in prison and is still living with my mom, my youngest brother, was out with his friend. And we were so worried. We don't want to call his phone and get signal, and the Israeli will have signal where he's located. And we were so scared. And then after they pull out of the village, Baha is driving, because from the rooftop we could see him with his car lights off, like in the middle. Like I'm talking about, they pull out of the village around 3:30 in the morning. So from 1 to 3:30 in the morning, me and my mom hiding in the corner of the roof, so fearing, because we're the only one in the house. All my sister and the brother is married, one in Moscow, one in Ohio, one in Saudi Arabia, one in Dubai. We're all over the world, by the way. And I'm in New Jersey, and Baha is the one who's only living with my mom. So that's what was going that time. What's going on now? He's still wanted. They come every week to arrested him, and every time he escaped, I don't know how, but he escaped. 3 or 4 weeks ago, they arrested his 2 brothers, the one, they always help him to escape. And it was actually over the news. Sadly, they stripped them naked. They put them in a cage and they beat in them. It was all over actually the news in Palestine, that accident. It became really loud and wild. But we have so many young boys already killed and so many in prison that basically the village has the older and the younger left. So for my mom, she has 13 children, and we all around the world. One Baha is left with her just because he spent years in prison and he could not finish his education. He has 2 years from Najah University, and we opened for him a small family business, as all of us, the brother and the sisters, give some money. Yeah. So yeah, nobody left. It's very sad, the situation there, and everybody is scattered and all around the world. Yeah. And if there's a few people left, they get job in Ramallah, so they lived in Ramallah and they just come and visit their family in the weekend only. So it's very sad when I go there. I want to reunion, like I saw Sami yesterday and today with all his friends in the university in Santa Barbara, and it just like it's so beautiful to see him hugging and everybody keeping in touch. And when I go there, like I have nobody from my high school and my friends who's still there in Kufr Ra'i. We're scattered all around. Yeah. So that's, I could tell you the situation right now. I have a couple of sisters live in Jenin, married and live in Jenin in the city. And my sister Sausan told me about Ibn Sina Hospital, and the scene happened last week. Her son, Omar, 3 years old, has ear infection, and that's the hospital she go to. So she was terrified for what happened. And she's a teacher in school. And for a month now, there is no teaching. They're remote, they're home. Her oldest son, 14 years old, not allowed outside the house since the past few months. My sister Erceline is worse. She's in Tulkarem. She has, she spent time in prison, and when she came out, it took her like 9 years to have a baby, and she has a boy. And since this happened, he never sleep in his room. He sleep only in the hallway in case any thing happening from the window or the balcony, she's so stressed and fear over him. So she's telling me, I sleep during the day and I hate the nighttime. As soon as the Maghrib Adhan happened, my heart beat until morning, because when Iyad was chased by the Israeli, like I left to Jordan for college and then I left to the US, she was after Iyad. She was born 2 years after Iyad. So she lived through Iyad and the Israeli searching the house and everything happening with us. So now she's living it again in Tul Karam, with fearing for her son, the one she tried for many years to have. Yeah. So yeah, that's how the situation there. Again, they don't go to the village a lot, fearing driving from Tul Karim, that's 45 minutes, or from Jenin, from the town, the 20-minute settlers and attacks and checkpoints and soldiers. So I feel like my mom is like lonely now. She left to Saudi Arabia to spend Ramadan with my sister in Saudi Arabia, so she doesn't stay home by herself. Yeah. And this big house is like, it's very sad for her. Yeah.
For research, I think it is difficult. I think it's difficult for people to get in, right? So I know in the universities there, they have a lot of problems with trying to get guest speakers, right? Let alone research. In my case, I think I had more problems in Lebanon than I had going to Palestine and so on. So I was actually arrested in Lebanon, and that's a story for another time. Yes, but otherwise, I think there's a lot of problems trying to get in. And even Palestinian researchers moving about from city to city, right, trying to get through checkpoints if you wanted to do research in places that you're not living in. Yeah.
Salma online wanted to know the significance of the book cover.
The whole story, or the half story? The cover went through different versions. This is Sireen, and Sireen's back. We found that photo. When I saw it, I thought it would be great because for those of you who don't know, there's a famous Palestinian artist, cartoonist, who drew you may have seen it, Handala, who's this boy who has his back turned to us, and he's always has his back turned to us. And the idea is that on return, he would turn around, and so this kind of if you will, the kind of feminist Handala, sort of having her back turned to us, and and then the poppy seeds are is something that comes out in the book. So you kind of get a sense of that. Yeah, and then there's actually in there somewhere the gate of their house, so, with the jasmine tree.
I have to say something about the dress. So Sami shared it with me. I just landed in Peru, and getting off the airport, I'm looking, and I am wearing a Palestinian brodered dress. And I never own one because I'm so picky, and I want this perfect dress, which is, I don't know who's going to create that perfect dress for me. And I was like, no. So I'm walking in the beach, and that's like a beach dress, the one in the cover. So I'm walking in the beach, and I said to my daughter, just take a picture of me walking in the sand barefoot. And she did. And I sent it to Sam, and he said, wow, it's a nice dress. And I was like, that's a beach dress. It's like, cost me nothing. And he said, don't ever get rid of it. One day maybe we'll have a movie and then we'll use that dress. But that's usually the Palestinian broderie, beautiful color and beautiful cloth. And my mom own one and all my sister own one. And every year I go, I really shop and shop, and I never get to like the perfect handmade one. It take a year to make one. And all these women, they made it for her, and it just like, I don't know, I have in my dreams some kind of design, and literally I have to make it coming true soon. And that's where the broader dress, I said, no, I wish I have one, I will let you put that, but I don't own one. And I always like to go back, and my kids always go back with me, the three of them. Even there, three of them live in New York City, and the three of them is working. But it's just something I want to put in them and their children and their grandchildren and everybody. Just, it's so nice to always go back home, and going back to Kufr Ra'i. And I hope one day you guys can come in. My new house is so big. My mom has 39 grandchildren. And 2018, when we were in for the wedding, everybody was there. And believe me, it's enough. It's enough for us. We have a lot of mattresses. You just put in the floor and it's camping. So it's beautiful. And we bought from the US a big tent, enough like 2 huge room. My kids put it in the roof and we sleep in the tent sometimes. But it's really beautiful house, warm. She cooked and baked everything fresh in the house, and all the trees around her house and the fig tree. And I ended up having a jasmine tree and fig tree in my house in New Jersey. And then I'm following my mom footstep with the gardening and everything like made at home, which is, I love that. And she shipped me the fresh olive oil every year from her land, fresh press in my grandfather machine. And she shipped it every year. So I eat fresh from my mom backyard, which is, I love that. So yeah.
Given how let's call it modest and private Yusuf seems, how did you navigate, sharing so much about the family, really exposing all of this? And
Good question. It's a trap question. um Actually, I think this is a major struggle, because in earlier drafts of the book, uh, there were things in there, and then I realized, I'm not here to expose the family, right? I'm here to tell their story. I'm not an investigative journalist that's trying to like, get you, or so there. Like any family, there are things that you don't want out in the public, right? But I've been told these things, right, by Sireen or others. I've learned these things. I'm hanging out with them, so I've learned these things. And so the question becomes, and there's an ethical question, right, is that some things just don't make for a good story to put in there, but then other things make for a good story, but then are just exposing the family in ways that are not not ethical. And so I think that with these types of projects, when you're working with someone else's story and someone else's family, and it's not my own family, that I'm I'm sort of responsible for what I say in that sense. I think one needs to have a certain level of ethical considerations that I don't know if I've met them, but I hope I have, Basil. I hope I have. I've tried, and I don't know where, if I will have succeeded or failed. I think that I told Sireen that in some ways it's only just begun, because 20 years it's all been hidden from view, and now it's all out. It's out. And so how people will react, how strangers will react, but also how family will react in reading. I mean, there's family members here, but no one has read it. right? So you can laugh now, or you can, but you haven't read it. And so what happens once people read it, and do my own ethical considerations and sensibilities actually, end up translating properly or not? Those are questions that, scare me. And now that we're doing these book tours, I'm like, sort of keeps me up. But yeah, I think that remains to be seen. And the other thing is that I remember as this was closing, when I was giving the sort of the final, remember when I was giving Kate the final draft, I was in a cafe, and I was, this one day, and I remember kind of being sad because in some ways the family, especially Iyad, was someone I also had imagined in a particular way. And as long as the book wasn't published, I could keep tinkering with this imagination, right? And I could keep playing with this character. And there's a relationship between me and this character that's building. And then, I was giving this last draft, and I felt this is it. Now the world will see this. And so that's a scary feeling.
I don't know what is عيب in English. What is عيب? Like shame. Oh, my mom, this is عيب. Everything you want to say to people is عيب. So me, I was telling Sami, I mean, at least now she doesn't read English, but if that translates to Arabic, I have to keep the copy from my mom's hand. Imagine reading it. I'm talking about things she did when we were young to keep us. For her husband lived in United Arab Emirates, and she raising these girls by herself, and he come only in the summer. And anything these girls make wrong or aib or shame, she will be the blamed, the mother, because people says, oh, she did not raise them very well. So for her, me saying those in the book, saying the time she beat us up, the time, like one time I was saying to Sami, we're eating dinner, and I said, imagine now we can eat one whole apple. He says, why? I says, we were 13. How much? She will buy one, cut it to 6 pieces. One chicken, cut it to 13 pieces. Like, where were you? She got so upset. I wasn't cheap, but no, I'm not saying, but this is how the life was. So for Yusuf, everything is you should not air our laundry. People should not know these details about us. So I don't know how she will feel when she read the Arabic version one day, but at least I'm comfortable as of now. She doesn't read English. Yeah.
I think, that's one of those things where I try to not air all that. For example, the 13 apples thing is not in there. So,
I wanted to ask a question about timing of this book coming out. Obviously, it's been in works for many years, and the timing could not have been more opportune, but also, I'm sure, very challenging in its own ways. Can you speak to that?
yeah, it's I mean, it's obviously a coincidence that it comes out in this time, and it's unfortunate in the sense, I mean, this was as I said, a 20-year project, and over the years many things have happened in Palestine. And so when things have happened, it's not as bad as this one, but just assuming I didn't know about this one, so each time was like really bad. And each time sometimes I would think maybe Palestine will be liberated and there won't be a need for this book, or maybe this book will be read differently. Sometimes I would feel like the issue of suicide bombing is past, and so maybe there's no one will care about this story, right? And sometimes, so there were different, I went back and forth, and And the other part of this is that, you know, I know that people are more interested in Palestine right now for all the wrong reasons. I mean, it's great that, right, but because of something is happening and so on. So obviously this book in that sense is timely, but then I wish it was not timely, right? And it made me think of, I've gone back and looked at certain parts of the book to think, would I have written them differently now? So far I have not felt that I would, but I've like doubted myself and gone back, and there's like things I remember, and you know, would I say this differently? Things in the conclusion, for example, that I would have, and that I so far I haven't felt anything. Yeah, I think I it is about someone who is in Islamic Jihad. So it's, I think, useful for people to understand that this is not about October 7. This is something much, much earlier than that. I mean, obviously 75 years earlier than that, but also, you know, the various periods of resistance that have come about. So I think this takes you back to understand some of that, or a lot of that, and the different phases of resistance and the different phases of oppression that have come about. Yeah.
Hi. I've never been to Palestine, and that was one of my goals in life, was to travel there and see it for myself. Can you talk about, Sami, maybe like as like your first time maybe going there? What was the scenery like? What was the emotions like? What perspective did you take from that trip alone that you wouldn't have necessarily taken from any other country? And yeah, if you could just talk a little bit more about the beauty of that country and things that we don't really see on the media. And you know, I'm dying to try the olive oil one day. One day we will inshallah see the, but if you could talk about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's it was almost 20 years ago, so I try to remember, but I remember thinking that I wasn't going to make it, not just because they would stop me and I wouldn't be able to get in, but just like, you know, one of those things where you, as yourself probably, you know, you always imagine you're going to go, and I felt like I was going into a prison, and a prison is a place where you're not, you know, you don't get to go if you're not a prisoner, right? So I thought, you know, the prison guards weren't going to let me in, and that I would, you know, see what's on the other side. But I think it's also important then not to romanticize, right? What how Palestine is. I mean, obviously it's beautiful, its landscape and its nature. But one of the things that what stuck with me actually was Jerusalem, because and I have family in Jerusalem, and one of the things that stuck is this holy city, the city of I don't know, the city of love, and I don't know what, was really a city of hate, in a deeply sad and terrible way, that you know, they've managed to create, I think, in my eyes at least, this kind of sectarian divisions, right? Between, especially in the city, between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And it's obviously a strategy of control, right? That you create these divisions and solidify them. That was really disturbing for me to hear from my family, who were saying, you know, talking about it in this way, and having to face that all the time. But the other thing is, the other part of this, not to romanticize, is that the beauty is then juxtaposed against the mobility or lack of mobility. So we drove today from Santa Barbara to San Francisco. And I mean, it was gorgeous, right? And we could take it in. And we didn't have to be afraid of the checkpoint that was going to stop us and whether we would be able to get through that checkpoint. I mean, I don't think any of us even thought of that I'm thinking about it now, right? And so that juxtaposed against, trying to, remember I was taking a lot of pictures and video and so on. But then it's, when I remember going to Hebron, for example, and having to stop at the checkpoint and get out of the car in this beautiful setting, and the dust, and having to walk because you couldn't keep going by, had to change vehicles and stuff. So that juxtaposition, I think, until until there is a liberated landscape, what you have to look forward to is that juxtaposition and that I don't have words that are PG, so I'll end there.
The first time we met in Amman, and I'm American citizen since 1993. But at the same time, I'm Palestinian with Hawiyya, Israeli Hawiyya. So when we get to the border, Sami has to enter as an American from the easiest, nicest place, and Sireen has to go through all the checkpoints, body search from Jordan to the Israeli to Jericho. And Sami finished and done and took a taxi, and you met me like an hour away from Jenin in a checkpoint. You're standing there, and here I am coming, strolling after hours of being interrogated, and meeting Sami and put him in the car with me. And then we went to Kufr Ra'i because he cannot go to Kufr Ra'i, showed up in my mom's door without me. So the poor guy, it's at least in the checkpoint, it was very easy for him. But for me, I mean, he's lucky that day. Maybe it took 5-6 hours. There is time when my kids took us 18 hours. We get home by 2 o'clock in the morning. So that take the tickle in your stomach, you're looking forward to see your mom and breathe and see your family and eat your mom meal that day and having dinner. I never know when I'm going to be home. As soon as I leave Amman, I will call them and text them, because when you get to the Israeli checkpoints and all the interrogation, you're not allowed to use your phone or cell. And these kids is with me and they're not used to all of that, but I'm so patient. I'm sitting there, and I know they're observing me because there is a mirror in front of me, but they're behind that mirror. So they don't let you, I don't see them, but they're seeing me. And they're letting me sit there for hours and hours to see how I'm going to behave. Well, I am going to lose my temper. I'm going to be angry, and so far and so far. And then they take all my luggage and they search piece by piece, every cloth, every book and things like that. And for them, as an American living freely here, every time they visit, especially my youngest daughter, she's 22. When she was young, she will cry, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. One time I have a video in Amman, I don't want to go. I'm going to be killed in the checkpoint, because she's not patient and she fear that if she make the wrong move, they're going to shoot. And that's the fear they go in, and they go with me. But last year, first time and last time, hopefully, Basil insisted to rent a car, and he need to fill up a gas and put in navigation. The gas station says 2 miles or 3 miles from the road. And without thinking, he went, and it was a settler road, not the Palestinian road. And how did I know? I just put my head to sleep, and the rental car got a message by satellite that the car in a zone, and thank God he left quickly. That car could be shot and he will be killed, because the road, this is the dirty, rocky road for the Palestinian. This is the settler road. And we cannot drive in that road. So he cannot fill up his gas, because the gas station for settler in the settler road. So those things, and I think will be the last time we'll ever rent a car there. Like he said, we have to live like them and stop from checkpoint to checkpoint. And then when I go through all of that and I go to my mom and I sleep for 2 days to recover, I will think, next year, why? I want to go to Europe. I want to go vacation somewhere else. But then next year, here I am. By Thanksgiving, I already buy the ticket before they go expensive to Amman. going there. As an American, I'm not allowed to Tel Aviv, never me. And sadly, I found out even my children, born and raised in New York, American citizen, just because their mom is Palestinian, they never allowed to travel to Tel Aviv. So they have for the rest of their life crossed through all the checkpoint with me to Jenin and go through all of that. So that's how Palestinian being treated, and this how American are freely to travel. Palestinian women age 50 and up, they're allowed, no, 55 and up, sorry to correct myself, allowed to Jerusalem. When I turned 55 and I went, there is a video of me saying, can you imagine a woman happy to be a 50? Guys, I'm so happy today. I'm crossing to Jerusalem and I'm in a checkpoint. And literally in front of all the Israeli soldiers, I'm making a video and I'm posting it on social media. Congratulations, I'm 55. I'm traveling to Jerusalem. And I did the posting. I was so happy I'm 55. I can enter Jerusalem. Men are 60 and women 55. And I did. And it just was the biggest moment for me. Before that, I was not allowed. And we tried to trick them a couple of times. We're American and put the American passport. And they said, where is your stamp from the airport? Oh, you have Hawiya. And then as soon as I put my name in the system, they know I have Hawiya. I'm a Palestinian born and raised. So I can't, and then my kids follow me. So those moments take the pleasure of going back to Palestine and being with your family. But as soon as you get and you put your foot there, and all the neighbor, older women come and see you, and you start giving all the gift. By the way, we take a lot of gift to every small and big and neighbor. Even the guy who tell her my mom land the olive and the harvest olive, we have to give him a shirt or a perfume or a t-shirt. My mom always give us the list. And Advil. Oh my God, I go to Costco. Advil and all those, yeah, it's so many, everybody in the neighborhood. So we take a lot of medicine and clothing and stuff for them. But as soon as you put your foot there and you see the family and the people coming to welcome you, and they bring in with them sugar or a bag of rice, by the way, they still do that, or a coffee or nuts or fruits, whatever they have in their land, and they sit and talk to you and they just want to listen to stories. You forgot all of that struggle. And the day you want to leave, always my kids. I remember a few years ago, Basil, can we postpone 2 days? School is starting in 2 days. We always wait to the last minute to leave there as soon as we put our foot there. And it's the same routine every year. And every year when I go, they don't want to go. And then suddenly I'm there. Last year, they followed me. Whatever they have a week or two, they follow me. So that connection, you never lose it as soon as the first time. So if you're coming, remember Kufr Ra'i, a beautiful love guest. And I want to tell you a funny story. I have this employee in the UN. I did not know even he's going to Palestine. And we did not have phone that time in the 90s. And he's coming back to my office and showing me a picture of my mom and my sister Isra. She was like 4 years old in my mom lap. And he said, as soon as we get to Jenin, I remember you saying you're from Kufr Ra'i. So we took the car and we get to Kufr Ra'i and we asked 3-4 people where Beit Abu Shkara, and people thought they are undercover Israeli soldiers, so nobody will tell them. And then he said in his English, trying to the Sireen, Sireen. And as soon as they heard my name, they called, I still remember him. His name is Hussein. He was a student in Birzeit University, the only one in the village speak English. So they got Hussein and he was able to understand. He works with me in the UN. So my mom and dad, amazing. They insisted he stay. He said, my clothes in the hotel in Jerusalem and his picture with my father dish dashing. They give him the dish dash to sleep, stayed for 2 days, cook him all the favorite meal. And he has another friend of him from Jerusalem to show him the road. And I never knew about it until he came back. Yeah, he walked in, and that's how my mom mentioned my name. You're in, done.
I'm happy. Parting comments. I hadn't prepared parting comments. I think the one thing that I would want to say is that one of the sort of motivations for writing, and there are sort of many motivations that come about in a project that takes this long. They change, but it really was to tell a story of a life, and a story of a life that is open to interpretation, that that I see as being not the last to tell the story, but there's a famous anthropologist, Michael Taussig, who says, but the one before the last. So it's open to interpretation. I tried really hard. As an anthropologist, we're trained to explain. I tried really hard to not explain, to just tell the story as it is, and to sort of put it out there for people to learn and see. And so hopefully you'll buy the book.
I feel like, thank you very much for coming, and read it and tell me what do you think. Email Sami or me. And I feel like now I could tell Iyad I did not forget him, because when I left that prison day, he said, Matinsini, he meant get a lawyer and get me out of prison. But he did not know that I did not forget him, and I'm Mansito. And I always want to tell my story and his story. And this book, I think, is not going to make you all not to forget him. And I think this is the only way I could say to Iyad, rest in peace. I did not forget you. Nobody forget you. And forgive us for anything. And if we, hopefully you will laugh more than you cry. Because when he read that scene, I cried a little bit. And I keep crying every time he read that scene. Yeah, it's the story we live to tell, and every Palestinian in any place they live around the world, they have a story, and I'm sure every one of you have a story. So it's nice to tell those stories and share it to people, and to know that we're human, and we have feelings, and we love and we hate, and we do things like everybody else, but in the end we love to live, and to live in peace, and to be free, and be able to travel from one place to another place, and to be kind of treated equally like everybody else. And I feel that that's what we're missing in Palestine. And it breaks my heart, the vote for no ceasefire yesterday, but it's just with help with everybody, I think we can make it peaceful for everybody to live. Like Sami said, Jerusalem is a beautiful city, but for one people cannot enter it based in their religion and race. It's heartbreaking for the Palestinian people, especially the month of Ramadan is coming. And in the same time, it's like, for me, the scene of prison, over 10,000 Palestinian young boy and girl are in prison. Like, so many are in prison in Palestine, and those kids, I keep saying kids because I keep looking at Iyad. He was a kid when he was arrested. They're spending the best of their year in there. So hopefully we all pray for peace and freedom for all of them. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Thank you. That's so nice. Thank you.
Oh, I think this book is going to open some hearts. So thank you. And I'm glad that finally we see it in print. Thank you for gracing our halls. This is really such a treat. Yeah. And also for those of you online, thank you for joining us as well. Thank you, everybody.